let's move along to the next step. So in the last video we were working on the rear end. I put the bushing in for the brake stay, and I put the C-clip on. And the C-clip is where you're going to need these pliers. These don't open up quite wide enough, so rather than putting it in the holes, I just put it on the inside of the tabs and just kind of work it in. Probably going to keep slipping off, but you'll get it in. So once that's done, then we can put on our anti-fade. And it doesn't matter if you're using an anti-fade or an OEM lock nut, all the same. Slide it in all the way. Then we need our retaining clip, the C-clip. You don't need the pliers to put the C-clip on, but you do need them to remove it. So this one I'll just slide on, and then we'll turn the anti-fade out, or lock nut, either way. You don't need a ton of pressure on it. You want to make sure everything's snugged up, so make sure your axle's all the way through, snug it up, and then just put a little bit more tension on it. And that's where a spanner wrench comes in, because you'll use the spanner wrench for adjusting the carrier, the anti-fade, and possibly some shocks. So I recommend getting yourself a spanner. It's definitely good to have. Then we can put our caliper on, and I don't put the caliper bolts, I don't tighten them down. This one I need to replace the pads, they're on the way. But the other reason is because sometimes you get a bubble in the brake line, an air bubble, because you have the loop that'll come up here. And I've spent way too much time trying to bleed a rear caliper, and it just didn't work. So what I'll do is I'll pop the caliper off, I'll lift it up above up higher, tap the brake line, and it'll send the bubble up, and then I can continue to bleed. But we'll do that in a later video once we're ready to bleed everything out. So now we've got our rear end on. I'm not going to put the shock on because I want to show you guys how to, if you were doing a brand new build and ordering custom shocks, how to figure out your extended and compressed length of the shocks. So once we get the front end on, get it as a roller, and then I'll show you how to do that. I do need to swap out the sprocket. This is a 39. I run a 38 with the Selby 363, and then I'll put on one of my sprocket guards. So we'll do that in a later one as well. Next thing is the airbox. So if you're running an OEM frame or even an aftermarket frame with a standard link, you don't need to make any modifications to the airbox. Just put it on, use the OEM boot, everything should line up, it'll work great. But because my bikes are no link, and this one is as well, the shock angle, because the mount is higher, the shock actually sits back farther, as opposed to the lower one with the linkage, it'll sit in farther. So I need to modify the airbox, and I use an OEM airbox because after several conversations with Leonard Duncan, he said in their testing the OEM airbox always worked the best, and that was dyno testing. It's such a good volume of air, even compared to the aluminum ones out there. So I always run OEM, and I've got this system pretty much worked out. It's down pat. Guy that I know, Jasper, makes these spacers, these aluminum spacers, and you just drill a small hole in the plastic, and they bolt right in, and then it has the cups for to slide onto the grommet. So that'll move the airbox back about 1.5 inches. And because you're moving the airbox back, it's a really tight fit, especially on these Lone Star frames. So what you need to do is I take the airbox and put it on a belt sander, and I sand down each side as much as I can. And there's actually an inner metal frame that I didn't even know was there until I hit it on a previous airbox. But so obviously you can't really go past there. I've never had one split on me or anything, but sand it down, get it all good, and it's still a tight fit, but it'll fit. So then on the rear, normally you have this upper area, and then you have your mount in the back. So what I do is I take a white pencil, mark it out, and then I use a Dremel with a thin cut blade and cut it out carefully, and that'll leave a hole in there, but it'll leave about a 3/4 inch piece of material there that you can bolt down another plate. So this one I got a little fancy with. I cut this out of poly on the CNC and fit it on there nicely. I put an extra support, little L bracket just from Lowe's, just to keep that, because you're putting the load on there, and this strip that's up here, it's pretty thin, so it can flex. So I wanted that extra support. And then what I did is I took it a step farther and I actually put a threaded insert. I heated it up, put a threaded insert in there so I don't need a nut on it. Unfortunately, I do need a spacer. I don't really need the spacer, but I do because of the lip on the rear bracket here. But no big deal. I had one that was the perfect size. So these are in here loosely right now because I ran out of 6mm nuts. I got more on the way, but you know, nice and clean. There's one other thing I have to do to the Airbox, and that's add more clearance for the shock spring. So what I'll do is I'll heat this up with a heat gun, and then take like a bottle of brake fluid or something that's a similar size, and I'll actually push in on it. So you heat it up just enough to make it soft, push in on it, and it'll clearance it out even a little bit more. I think if I left it like this, it's going to hit, it's going to rub. So I did that on my race bike, and it worked out well. You just got to be careful because, you know, you're heating up. I heat it from both sides, try to get it nice and even, and then just push on it. And it only has to go in a little bit. You know, you don't have to go crazy with it. So once all that's done, the Airbox will slide onto the grommets like it normally does. Just push it up into place. And this will rub the frame, so it will rub the powder off. I actually added some helicopter tape in here, some UHMW helicopter tape to try to help minimize it, but I don't think it's going to last very long, honestly. It's still going to rub through. So here's the aluminum spacer that I have, and then so the aluminum spacer will go up in here, and then I can push up on it, and that 6mm bolt will thread in, hopefully. And there it is. There's the Airbox. So you need to plug the snorkel tube, because the snorkel tube won't work on LSR frames. I've tried. Normally I go to Lowe's and just go to the plumbing department. They make a 2-inch rubber cap that you can pop right over. But on this, I'm actually going to make I'm going to start making some plugs for this Airbox, and I'll be selling those on my website. So I'll do that later. But the Airbox is in. Everything is clear. All right. So the next thing is, on this one, I decided to use a 450R rear master cylinder. And I've actually never done this before, but I had a bunch of these around, and it's getting harder to find the 250R master cylinders, so I figured I'd try it out. So to make this work, you have two options. You can either take out the internals and put the rod from a 250R in there, or you can buy this adapter clevis, and Gil Durbin makes this. He makes a bunch of parts for a 250R, really great, awesome quality, good craftsmanship. This costs about $70. He does sell them on eBay. I think it's Durbin machine, or I could probably hit him up directly. So I got one of these clevis adapters rather than using, because most of the OEM masters that you'll find for a 250R, the rod's going to be all rusted out and just not look good. This is super nice. So the other thing you need to do on the 450R, there's actually a bracket, and the master cylinder mounts from the back side. So these are threaded. Well, we don't need that because we have the threaded bungs on the frame. So if you try to go thread to thread, you're never going to get it tightened down the way you want it. So you need to drill these out, and all you're doing is shaving off those threads. So a 15/64 bit is the perfect size to fit a 6mm bolt in and not have any play. So I've already done that, drilled those out. So now we can put this on, and you want your reservoir tube to go to the front. So that slides in. And I have not tried this yet, this setup. I just ordered a new master cylinder guard, so that's on the way. So I'm not going to tighten this down because I'm going to put that guard on there. You don't really need the guard, but I want to minimize anything my boot might hit, or just keep stuff clean. So now we can put our pedal on. This is a custom CNC billet pedal made by Sonny Frisia, and he sells them in the Facebook groups. And super nice work. Guy is a perfectionist. Awesome pedal. He makes them in different colors, anodized. You can also get different color cleats. So I'll probably swap these out for a different color once maybe black. I have another set of black that I can use. And then it just uses the OEM spring. Now with the OEM spring, especially with the aftermarket frame, I take a piece of fuel line and wrap that. Just slide it on there because that's always hitting the frame. So that will minimize any powder markup and stuff like that. And when you get your frame powdered, make sure they don't powder the brake mount, because these things usually it's a very tight tolerance. If you get it powdered, you're going to be sanding the crap out of it, and it's a pain. So just keep that raw. Really not an issue. So now we can put that on, and so I can see that because this pedal has a radius on the inside of the mount here, and this is square, the clevis is square, I'm off about a 1/16 of an inch. So I don't think this pin's going to go through because this pin tolerance is super tight. Now, so what I'll do in this case, rather than drilling out the hole in the pedal, which is going to add slop, I'll actually I only need to do it to one side of the clevis where that radius is. I'll just grind this down just enough to clearance it, that 1/16 of an inch, and then we'll get a nice tight fit with the pin and be good to go. The other thing I can see is I like my pedal to be down farther, because when I'm racing, when I'm in a attack position forward, the angle of your bottom, the sole of your boot is going to be down. And this is something most guys don't think about when you're setting up your controls. You want your controls to be accessible whenever possible. If you're leaning, if you're sit back, if you're in attack position. So what I've found is by having the pedal up too high, I actually have to lift my leg to hit the brake, which is not ideal. You want to basically, obviously motocross boots have minimal flex in the ankle, so you want that pedal to be in a position where if I'm leaning off to the left, I can hit it. If I'm leaning off to the right, I can hit it. And depending on the pegs or the nerfs you use, the height is going to be different. So that's something you need to adjust after you get your pegs or nerfs on and see where your foot is at. But I can already tell that probably where this is going to be, because my lock nut here is all the way up. I don't think it's going to work. It might, maybe just right, but I'll have to wait and see. So if it's not, my two options are I take this lock nut out or find a thinner one that I can use, or I could, it's not ideal, but I could cut a little bit off the clevis, or I can call, I could reach out to Gil and say, hey, I need one that's a little bit shorter because this is just, doesn't let my pedal go where it needs to be. But I'll figure that out later once I get this all mounted up, once we get the nerfs on, and I'll see where it's at. And the same thing goes with any of your controls, whether it's your shifter or your levers on the handlebars. You got to see where that needs to be. If you put your shifter too low, your foot is going to have a hard time getting under it. If you put it too high, you're going to have to lift your leg to shift. And because I'm coming in hot into corners and I might be leaning one way or another, I normally have to brake. Sometimes I have to shift. So foot placement is key in racing, especially, and finding where that balance is and being able to access all of your controls at any time, in any position. I know a lot of guys don't even use their back brake, but they're really missing out because it allows you to square off your corners and slide into them. And I can go over in another video some of the concepts and stuff that I've learned from the pros, because I was trained by Bo Barron and Logan Huff back in January and learned a ton from those guys. Super helpful. So I'll relay some of that information to you guys. But that's it for today. We got this stuff in, loosely fit. I'll make some fine tuning to it. The reservoir itself, I'm not concerned about. I probably won't use this 450R reservoir because it just doesn't really work well. My preferred one is Nelson Precision. They make a Billet 250R standard reservoir, but they've been out of stock for a while because they're super backed up. So I think I have an OEM one that I can use. And we'll also have to make a bracket to mount that, because if you look here, this frame bar is going to be too close. I had it happen on my race R. So I just got some bar stock so I can bring the whole thing forward and then mount the reservoir there and not interfere with this bracket. But I'll take care of that in a later video. So that's it for now, guys. Not sure if I'll do handlebar controls next or prep the A-arms and start the front end. I want to get this thing as a roller, and then we can get into the shock stuff and all that. So, all right, that's it for today. See you guys.